All right. Hi, guys. Thanks for taking some time on your, what is it, Sunday? Sunday, to tune into another one of our webinars. I'm not going to do much talking, but I did want to introduce, this is Emily Potter. She's a registered dietitian and is here to help just give you a brief presentation on a couple different nutrition topics, and then just ask questions and use her as a resource. She's super knowledgeable. So we're going to share our screen so you can see the presentation, and then once she's done, we'll switch back and you guys can ask questions. All right.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and like Lyndsey said, just taking the time to learn more about nutrition, and just today we're gonna talk about kind of what nutrition looks like in this super unique time, and what it means for you as a hockey player, and what it means just how to navigate being at home more, and the grocery stores kind of looking how they're looking. So at any point in time, feel free to ask questions in the chat. And then at the end, Christina will talk through them, and we'll kind of tackle those together. And then Lyndsey, feel free to jump in wherever you see fit too.
Sounds good.
So I want you guys to look at all of these different emotions, these feelings and emotions. I'm sure that everyone feels these in a day, even when there isn't something like this COVID-19 and coronavirus going on right now, right? So a lot of these feelings and emotions are pretty heightened right now. You might be feeling frustrated and sad that the hockey season's over, or you might be feeling confused, like not really understanding exactly what's going on, or you might be bored, like you're just stuck at home. You're watching all of these videos and things on social media, and you're just kind of feeling not super motivated, sad, just feeling all these different emotions. So something that's really important when it comes to nutrition is being able to understand these emotions and how it impacts our behaviors, our eating behaviors, right? So something that I want to really invite you guys to do through this next week is pay attention to when you're starting to feel bored, or when you're starting to feel anxious or stressed or frustrated. What are some of your behaviors? So really tapping into that mindfulness awareness. So bringing awareness to how you're feeling is super important, because our emotions drive our behaviors most of the time. Lyndsey, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when it comes to nutrition, just recognizing which of these emotions maybe trigger eating choices that make you feel really good, and maybe some of these emotions that trigger eating choices that lead to things that you don't really feel that great about. Like, for example, when I get bored, I sometimes will just like wander over to the pantry and just start eating stuff without even thinking about it. And a lot of times the stuff in the pantry isn't always the good fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that. So I think, like Emily said, just really pay attention and think about those feelings and ultimately how it influences some of the things that you guys are eating. I think that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And realizing, some everyone's different. How everyone is reacting in this unique time is super different. So someone who might be feeling anxious might go to the pantry and might, kind of use food to kind of tackle these feelings that don't feel really great. Or someone might not want to eat. They might not have an appetite. They may, want to skip meals and things like that. So everything is super different. Also, just your levels of exercise might be changing too. Without hockey practice and things like that, the way that you're exercising might impact those hunger levels and emotions as well. So with that being said, we really want to focus in on our, we call them hunger and fullness cues, right? So we all know what it feels like when we're starving, right? When our tummy is actually grumbling, when we have those stomach pains and we're just feeling that our body is physically feeling hungry. So in those times, we know we need to eat. Our body needs food. It might be, think about a time after hockey practice where you really worked your body and you just felt super hungry and it felt so good to eat that meal and you felt, stronger and better and more energized after eating. So right now with some of these unique, again, just being at home more, really asking yourself, am I actually hungry or am I kind of going back to those emotions? Am I bored? Am I feeling scared? Am I feeling anxious or worried or stressed out? Any of those feelings, that's kind of leading to you maybe wanting to eat more or eat less or eat differently than how you would if we were kind of in a more scheduled, I'll say, kind of back to normal life, if you will.
Yeah, I think something too to think about is, and we'll get to this later in the presentation, but it's easy to, I think, sometimes lose track of how much we're actually eating when we're at home. Usually if you're someone who packs a lunch, you take your lunch to school and you have your snacks in your little baggies and you've got your lunch in your Tupperware cases and you kind of know exactly how much you're actually eating. Whereas when you're at home and you're just like digging into a bag of whatever, I think it's a little bit harder to kind of keep track of how much we're actually eating unless we really listen to what our body's telling us about whether or not we're actually hungry. So I think that's a big piece of this too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes time. And it takes time to really know ourselves and know our bodies. And it's almost in this new situation with being at home more, we're kind of having to learn our bodies and what they're saying in a way that we've never really had to before, right? So with that being said, just things like, a little tip would be if you feel hungry, instead of grabbing the whole bag, put some in a bowl, right? And then put the bag away. And if you want more, then go back, fill the bowl up, and then come back, right? So it's kind of changing, not totally, scheduling everything out, minute by minute, but more of just kind of bringing more awareness, I think is our main point here, is just kind of paying more attention and then deciding, and we'll kind of give you some tools of how to work around that as well. So I think for here, am I hungry? It's just kind of bringing it back to those emotions and what's driving your choice to maybe eat food or not eat food or maybe eat differently. So talking about, I just mentioned some tools, some ways that we can really kind of rein in if we're feeling maybe out of control, we're kind of just eating whenever we want to, or maybe we're eating less than we want to, or whatever that looks like, or feeling really anxious, even just about our eating behaviors as a whole, and maybe we're not feeling great in our own bodies right now. This is a way that this is kind of like a little bit more structured way, and maybe it looks similar to what your way of eating would be when you're going to school, having practice, things like that, right? So how do we make this more realistic for what's going on right now? So in the morning, whenever you get up in the morning, we want to have breakfast, and then we want a mid-morning snack. At noon, we'll have lunch, and then between noon and nighttime, we'll have another snack, and then around nighttime, we'll have dinner, and then later in the evening, we'll have a snack. So an example of this would look like if you wake up at 7 a.m., excuse me, you want to have breakfast within the first hour of waking up. So you'll have breakfast at about 8 a.m. and then 2 hours later, you want a snack. So even if you wake up at 10 and eat breakfast around 10, this is just an example right now, I guess is what I'm trying to say. This is just an example way of eating. So you want to eat you don't want to go longer than 4 hours of eating. So you want to eat something about every 2 to 3 hours. So
why is that?
Great question. So this really helps regulate our blood sugars, right? So we don't want our blood sugars elevating, going really, really high, and then going really, really low. So when we eat a meal, our blood sugars elevate. And then if we don't eat a meal, they start to decline. And if we don't eat for a while, that's when we start to feel really tired, kind of irritable, things like that. So with this way of eating really helps regulate our blood sugars, which helps a lot of other organs in our bodies function really well. And it also just lets our body know that it's going to have food and it's going to have nourishment, and we're always going to have a sustained source of energy, right? And it's really going to help our metabolism and really regulate a lot of those other body systems. So do you have a question?
Mm-mm.
All right. So we'll start at 8 a.m. and then 2 hours later, we want a snack. And then about 2 to 3 hours later, lunch. 2 to 3 hours later, snack. 2 to 3 hours later, dinner. 2 to 3 hours, another snack. So something that I really want to encourage you guys to is maybe, writing a schedule out, trying this for a meal, trying this for a day, seeing how this goes for you, and having a structured way of kind of paying attention to more of the times times of day also helps you be able to wrap in a lot of those emotions and a lot of those other feelings and things, and am I hungry that we talked about, right? So if you have breakfast and around 9 a.m. you're bored and you start going to the fridge, but you're not really hungry, but your snack isn't until 10 a.m., right? You'll say, oh, well, I know I'm going to eat at 10 a.m. So, I'm going to go do something else until then, instead of eating something in between, if that makes sense. So with that, we really want our breakfast, lunch, and dinner around this time, right? Where activity you don't really have practice as frequently, right? So we want our plate for our main meals to have a carbohydrate, protein, and a fat. So we really want half of our plate to be vegetables and fruits. This is really important. This has a lot of our good fibers, a lot of good vitamins and minerals. We want a fourth of our plate to be whole grains. So those are things like potatoes, breads, rice, pastas, things like that. And then our protein, we want lean protein. So lean protein means just lower in fat, right? And there you can see the examples of some lean protein on there. With our snacks, we want to make sure that they are at least having a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fiber. So a fiber, so that means, so an example of this would be a carbohydrate could be popcorn. A protein could be, you have any examples, Coach Lyndsey? Almonds, good. So you could have popcorn, almonds,
and a piece of fruit.
Or a non-starchy vegetable. Excuse me. So maybe like some celery, carrots, cucumbers, peppers, things like that.
Can you explain why they want protein that has less fat, but up in the left corner it says that we do want fat? Can you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends mostly on the serving size, right? So for this example, you can see that with our fat, and is about 1 teaspoon, right? And the types of fat are down at the bottom left with our avocado oils, nuts, seeds, things like that, which is have sources of fat in them, but we want them in smaller amounts. So if our protein has more fat in it than it does protein, then we're taking up 1/4 of our plate with fat instead of the protein content.
Gotcha. Okay, is that the last slide?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're gonna stop showing. We know that was
a lot of information.
Yeah, and pretty high level, but if you guys have like super specific questions, feel free to ask them, and Christina will read them off to us.
All right. Awesome. So the first question, I think we have this addressed, but let us know if there's anything we left out. Is there a certain type of food you should really be eating every day to keep a healthy and strong body? And that came from
who?
From Brooklyn Higgins.
Cool. Nice question, Brooklyn.
Do you want to go for it?
No, you're the dietitian. I'm here for emotional support.
So there isn't a specific food that you can just eat and everything, all of your problems or whatever, everything that you ever dream of is solved in one. So it's more of making sure that we have like that plate that we had up, it has every component, right? So I would say to have a strong, healthy body is making sure that we have all of components of that plate, and eating more like consistently that way, I guess I would say.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is from a mental standpoint, like it's important to recognize what type of person you are. Like I'm the type of person that I like to eat almost the exact same thing every single day except dinners. I'll kind of mix up dinners. Some people can't do that. Some people like need variety every single time they eat. And so I think it's just important to kind of know which one you are, because it'll make things a lot easier for you when you're trying to plan out what your eating's going to look like.
All right. Greta Setlock asked, what if you already ate, but you get hungry again?
That is another really great question. So my question back to you, Greta, would be what did your meal or snack contain, right? So a reason, I don't know if I really explained this, but a reason why we want to have balance in our snack is for that reason, right? So if I only ate popcorn, so popcorn is a carbohydrate, if I only ate that, and then this has actually happened to me before, I've only eaten popcorn for a snack, and then maybe 30, 45 minutes later, I'm hungry again, right? And that's because specifically for carbohydrate, our body uses it really quickly. So it's gonna, our body's gonna use those carbohydrates, and then it's gonna be needing more, hence the hunger again, being hungry again. So if I added almonds to that and had protein with it and a fiber and a non-starchy or like the celery or carrots, the fiber is going to fill me up, the carbohydrate's going to give me energy, but the protein is going to help prolong the energy, right? So it's kind of gets a little sciencey here, but when you eat protein with your carbohydrate, your protein kind of helps slow down the process of the carbohydrate breaking down a little bit. So all that to say, having each component, that carbohydrate, protein, and fiber for your snack, we're just talking about snack right now, that's going to help you have more sustain, not feel so hungry so quickly after your snack.
And I think two things I would add is, one, somebody when I was younger used a great analogy. Like if you have a fire and you throw a piece of popcorn in the fire, it's going to burn like that. But if you throw a piece of like chicken in the fire, it's going to take a while to burn. And like that same kind of thing is going on inside your stomach, where it takes a little longer for those things to be digested. And the other thing I would add is just if you like Emily said, if you make a really balanced snack and you still find that you're hungry half an hour later, it probably just means you need to eat a little bit more during your snacks. So,
and that's the thing. And the thing about nutrition is be really kind to yourself, especially right now during this time that is a little weird. And, last week you may have just totally indulged in, I don't know, seeing things like eating all of your quarantine snacks already or whatever, and that's okay. Like, that's okay. There's no need to beat yourself up about that or feel anxious about that at all. Like, show yourself some grace. This is a really weird time, but moving forward, being able to say, how can I, maybe have more timely meals, or how can I pay attention to my hunger cues a little bit better, or how can I balance my meal or my snack?
Okay, here's the next question. Would you encourage older athletes to meal prep?
I have my own opinion about that.
Go for it, coach.
I would say absolutely. I mean, I meal prep all the time, and honestly, I think it helps a lot with that emotional component, right? Like, a lot of times I think people, when you're hungry, you are a lot more likely to just reach in the fridge for whatever's easiest rather than what it is that you actually want, which is a more balanced meal or balanced snack. And so, I meal prep my entire day when I go into the office, just because I know that I'm gonna have everything that I want throughout the day. I think it's also just a really good like life skill to practice, because when you get older and you're working in a job, or even now with school, but when you're older and you're working in a job, like, you either spend a bunch of money like buying your lunch every single day, or you learn how to meal prep and bring a healthy lunch with you to work. So I mean, older athletes, younger athletes, I think it's a great thing for all of you guys to practice.
And I think that's a key, right? Like, it's a practice, it's a habit, it's something that you have to learn. And so that's something that I would be happy if anyone is interested in tips, tricks, anything like that. If you'd want to reach out to me, I don't know the best way for them to do that, but basically, it's easy to get discouraged because it could be overwhelming. I know sometimes, we like to meal prep on Sunday evenings, and we kind of changed that up a little bit because it was kind of like, ugh, we have to go meal prep, and it was more because we just needed to do it earlier in the day when we had a little bit more energy, and before we, kind of before the day would get away from us. So it changes all the time. But
And again, I think meal prepping is a lot easier if you're like us and you're okay eating the same thing every day. Because for a while there, we were trying to like have a different meal prepped every single day.
Yeah.
And it took forever, and it was just like not worth it. So now we eat pretty much the exact same lunch and snacks every single day, mix up dinners, and it works out really well. So it just kind of depends again on who you are.
Awesome. All right, this is from Mia Preston. What's the best thing to eat after a workout?
Go for it.
I would say depends on the workout, right? So if you're doing more cardio, you really need to replenish, and it depends on how long too, right? So if you're going for like 30-minute, and the intensity, right? So how long and how hard you're going for is all going to dictate those needs. So I think sometimes it's easy to overestimate how much we need after a workout. But let's just say, I don't know, what would be a typical workout for these players?
I mean, right now it just depends. I think if you guys go outside and you maybe do some sprints, or you rollerblade for half an hour and then you stick handle for another 15 minutes. I mean, I think one thing that's challenging is it's so hard to replicate how much work you're doing when you play hockey. Like it's one of the most energy intensive sports out there. So this, I think, to M's point, the recovery snacks that you're gonna need now are probably different than you're gonna need when you're playing. But I think keep going with the whole, like, if you do a running versus a strength.
Okay, so if you go for like a 30-minute run, and it's like a pretty good run, like you're not sprinting, you're not jogging, like, but you're giving a fair amount of effort, you got to replenish those glycogen stores. So basically replenish your carbohydrates in your body, because your muscle uses carbohydrates, so you need more. You need to replenish those and when you're doing more cardio, your body's going to use those carbohydrates. But also make sure it's paired with like a protein or something like that. Basically a balanced snack is what it kind of comes down to. But if you're doing more of like a strength training and like just hitting the weight room for 30 minutes pretty intensely, then you would want more of those proteins and probably a little bit less. So like those ratios between carbohydrate and proteins would be a little bit different.
A good one that, I mean, we always would drink chocolate milk after, because it does, after practices, just because it does have a good mix of carbs and proteins, and it gets into your body really quickly because it doesn't have to digest the liquid. But if you're lactose intolerant or something and that doesn't work for you, there are other options. So you just have to get creative.
Yeah. So I would just say to your question, we kind of went around, but chocolate milk is a really good one because it has exactly what Coach Lyndsey said. Another really good one is I'm drawing a blank. Oh my gosh. Oh, like bread and peanut butter, right? So you have your bread with your carbohydrates, your protein with your peanut butter. Like a protein shake, like a smoothie, it would be really good too, with like protein powder, some fruit, some spinach, or things like that. And again, if you want more examples, just reach out.
All right, let's flip that. What's a good pregame meal?
So again, balanced, right? So that easy plate would be really helpful to follow in terms of getting different types of your different types of nutrients. And more, I think pregame is more about timing than anything. Then I think timing of the meal is more important than the what.
Well,
would you agree?
I mean, we were always taught, like, definitely have a little more carbohydrate before you play, just to make sure, for two reasons. One, to make sure you've got energy, but two, it just digests a little bit easier than if you loaded up on like a giant salad right before you played. It probably wouldn't feel as good. So
that's a good point.
I think that's always kind of how I looked at it, was I almost did like a third of my plate carbohydrates and then like a little bit less for proteins and vegetables than I normally would. But
yeah, well, and that reminds me of like the moderate and hard training.
Yeah, we can send those out. There's like different versions of that plate thing that will kind of answer those questions. The only other thing I would add is, like, everybody's different and everybody's tolerances are really different, and things change over time. Like, as you get older, like it does change. So, for example, in high school, I used to love having a peanut butter and banana sandwich before I played. And then when I got to college, for some reason, like, it made me feel awful to have a peanut butter and banana sandwich. So I had to completely change what I did before games, and you guys may have to do that too. So what works? That's why it's hard. Like, I know a lot of our answers are kind of vague, but nutrition's such a like personalized thing that it's really hard for us to just like give a general answer. Like, you have to really explore what works for you kind of within these really high level guidelines.
All right, excellent. What are the foods that we should 100% avoid? And this comes from Isabella.
So I come from one of my philosophies around nutrition is that all foods fit. So I don't think that there are any good and bad foods. There's just food. And so I think all foods fit, meaning all foods have a time and a place, right? So recognizing eating candy, we'll just go with that example. Candy is not a bad food. It's not a bad thing. It's just recognizing how it makes us feel, how often we're eating it. You know, is it something that we want to make more of our daily routine, right? And knowing that candy might be a sometimes thing, right? It might be an every now thing or something for special occasions or something like that. Because I know if I ate candy all day, every day, it tastes great, but I just don't feel good after it. So again, kind of what Coach Lyndsey was saying, it's kind of an ambiguous answer, but I think there isn't a food that I would say never, never, never eat this, right? So because a lot of nutrition, there's a lot of things that like bring you joy, bring you happiness. It's, you know, you eat with your friends, it's social and things like that. So there's a lot of different layers that go into that.
And a lot of you guys know, like, should I eat an entire sleeve of Oreos? Probably not. Should I have like 2 or 3 because it makes me feel happy? Yeah, that's fine. So I think you guys know for the most part what makes you feel good and what doesn't make you feel good. I would definitely avoid eating like ice rink snow. That would be really my only recommendation. But yeah.
All right, from Aubrey Harris, are emotions always the cause of hunger?
No.
No, this is great, very insightful, great question though. They're not always, I mean, hunger has so many levels to it, right? There's things called hormones that dictate our hunger, and things like our physical activity level that dictate hunger. Our emotions dictate hunger.
How frequently we're eating.
How much we're eating, how frequently, how often we're eating, the kinds of foods we're eating, right? So there's a lot of things that go into hunger. Emotions are an aspect of it, right? And something that we typically don't tend to think of, and that's a big reason why we talked about it today, is especially feeling bored, right?
I think it's less about, like, I think our point with that, just so that you're understanding, Aubrey, is it's not so much that your emotions make you hungry, it's just sometimes they make you think you're hungry when you maybe aren't necessarily hungry. So, like, thinking about the boredom thing, sometimes you get bored, you don't know what else to do. Eating some Cheetos sounds good, so you go eat some Cheetos because you're bored, not because you're hungry. So that's more what we were talking about, is sometimes your emotions can trick you into thinking you're hungry, which is why you really need to like check in with your body and ask yourself, am I actually hungry? Like Emily talked about.
Right, and it's more of the eating behavior. So like if I'm feeling scared, I might a way for me to feel better is if I go hug my dog, right? So I'm scared, and I know I feel less scared when I hug my dog, right? So if I'm bored and I go eat, that makes me feel less bored, right? So so we're kind of just challenging you guys to say, I'm bored. Maybe I should, go outside and do some stick handling, or, kind of recognizing those different ways that we feel less bored or less scared or less anxious or whatever those feelings might be.
All right, awesome. So we have a question from Lena Travis. We know water is really important for a healthy diet. How much water should each group be drinking daily or drinking every day?
I'm gonna grab I'm gonna get visual aid. Hold on.
And I'm gonna do a song and dance. Well, no, I'm just kidding. I do think before she comes back, there is like an actual equation, if you want to get sciencey, that you can do to figure it out how much you need, that we can send out later.
Yes. So just an easier way to think about this is, I'm sure you guys have Hydro Flask, whatever. I always carry around this Nalgene bottle, and it's 32 ounces. I don't know if you can see that so well. Cool. So I try to drink 2 of these. So that's 64 ounces. That's like the minimum anyone, or I would say for any age group, right? Just as a normal person, right? But if you're an athlete, which all of you guys are, you're gonna want to drink more. So if you're kind of looking at this and being like, wow, that's a lot of water, I would challenge you or invite you guys to try to do 2 of these. So 64 ounces. There's 8 ounces in a cup. So if you math whizzes want to go and tackle that, you can. But I would start there. And then again, it changes based off of your different activity levels and things like that. But
it's also a habit.
Yes.
Like, I think there's a lot of people who struggle to drink a lot of water in a day, and it's just because they haven't built up the habit. Like, we were always told, if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So you kind of have to build the habit of drinking before you get thirsty in order to stay hydrated. So even if you need to set like a little reminder clock every 30 minutes or every hour just to kind of start training your brain to actually remember to take a sip of water, then do it. I mean, I think it's such an important thing as athletes to be hydrated all the time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I have 2 questions that I'll ask kind of in the same, because they're from the same person. You said we shouldn't eat starchy vegetables, but doesn't starch store more energy when we want that energy? And then the second question is, if you're not the one making meals, how can you keep balance?
I feel like I'll tackle the first question.
Oh yeah, no, I don't want the starchy vegetable question.
So great, these questions are awesome. So starch is sugar, right? And sugar is carbohydrate. So we do want starchy vegetables. We do want to eat those. They just fall under the carbohydrate category of our plate versus our non-starchy vegetables. So our starchy vegetables are like potatoes. I love potatoes. Legumes. Beans. Sorry.
Legumes is a fancy term.
I'm drawing a blank. Oh, like squash, things like that. Our peas, corn, those are all considered our starchy vegetables, all really great sources, really great, a lot of nutrients and all of those things. They just fall under our carbohydrate. So if all of your plate, like if half of your plate was corn, then we would want that to you guys to be able to think about that and say, oh wow, this is half of my plate is carbohydrate instead of half of my plate is a non-starchy vegetable. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yeah. And then as far as the balance with, I'm assuming when you say you're not the one preparing your meals, it means that your parents are preparing your meals. I think there's a lot of different things you can do here. One, offer to help cook meals with your parents. I'm sure they would love and appreciate that. Hopefully when we send out these resources to you guys, we'll make sure you get this all in an email. You'll be able to kind of say, look, this is what a healthy plate is supposed to look like. And we had macaroni and cheese the other night. I don't really know if there was enough protein in that. Can we add some grilled chicken to it next time? Like, I think it's just really on you guys to have those conversations. Recognize that, what, your parents maybe never got this kind of education as far as nutrition is concerned, and that's totally fine. Mine never did. So when I would come home in the summers from college, I was cooking constantly, and they ended up loving it because, one, they didn't have to cook dinner, and two, it helped them kind of connect with nutrition in a way that they never had before. I understand that a lot of you guys are not the ones buying the food in your house, but I would encourage you to kind of sit down with your parents and say, look, this is what we learned. this is how I want my plate to look for meals and snacks. These are some things I would love for you to get the next time that we go to the grocery store, or I'll come with you and I'll pick out some different things and I'll go online and learn how to actually cook them. So I think there are a lot of ways. I really think that if you just have that conversation with your parents or whoever's cooking the meals in your house, I really think you'll be able to have a good positive response from them.
All right, excellent. And we're almost out of time. So I'll tell you that there's a lot of questions about kind of go-to foods for breakfast, lunches, dinners, snacks, things like that. So perhaps there's an opportunity for us to create some like menus or recipes that we can share with the girls later. But we'll end on this final question here from Greta Setlock. She asked, how much food should you have in a meal? So we kind of talked about what should your meal should be made up of, but how much should we have?
So I think those plate examples are going to be really helpful. So it's being able to grab a plate, right? And I don't know, should I?
I'll grab a plate.
She's going to go grab a plate. But think about in that PowerPoint the easy training day and how things were broken up into, right? So having half of your plate be fruits and non-starchy vegetables, having a fourth of your plate, like a corner of your plate, be your protein, and a quarter of your plate be your carbohydrate. So that being able to kind of look at your plate and visualize, because the reality is it's hard to like weigh out and measure and do all of these things with your food when you guys are constantly on the go and thinking about being in season and stuff like that. And doing school, all these outside school activities, and you're not going to be able to do that. So the reason why I really like the plate method is what I call it, is because, or what it's called, is because it gives you a quick visual of, ooh, like more than half of my plate is made up of carbohydrate, and what can I add to this to make it more like the plate that we showed in the PowerPoint, which we'll send more about.
Thing I was going to say, so also keep in mind how big the plates are in your house. A lot of people have different sizes of plates. So I would, and you can tell me differently, but I would say start with the smaller plate. So like this is about the size of her head. Okay, so start with the smaller plate. If you're still hungry when you're doing the plate method with the smaller plates in your house, then try the bigger plate and see if that fills you up, and try to really figure out, I think we should just put this over your face. That works. And try to figure out which plate is better for you and fills you up and makes you feel good. But I would start smaller first, especially as you're kind of like really asking yourself, am I hungry more? I think it'll just really help you get in tune with your body. And you may find right now, maybe you need the small plate. Once season starts again, you may need the big plate because you're skating a lot. So it really just depends. And I think you just have to experiment with it a little bit.
And I think exactly what Coach Lyndsey is saying is be kind to yourself. It takes practice, and it will always evolve. Your nutrition and what you need and what your body needs, especially when you're 8 years old versus when you're 16 years old, is going to change. And just finding out what works for you is not always easy. So that's why we're here to help if you need some extra stuff.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. This was recorded. We'll send it out afterwards along with some other resources that Emily and Lyndsey showed on today's webinar, and we hope everyone has a great rest of their weekend.
Oh, Christina, we should mention that we're probably going to be doing another webinar on Tuesday.
That's right. Yep. So I'll get that in the on our Facebook page and events, as well as send it out in an email so that everyone can get a chance to register. So that'll be on mental performance, and it's with Brian Kane,
Coach Aaron's husband, for those of you who don't know. But it's going to be awesome. That one's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to tune into that one just so I can learn. Well, so yeah. But anyway, thank you guys. This is awesome. Hope you guys learned a lot, and we'll send out some stuff.
All right, bye.